Welcome back to a mental health break. I'm your host and author of the book, Mr. Lanci Talks Mental Health, Vincent A. Lanci.
And I am the guest for today. My name is Izzy Baker, host of PSA Podcast, a podcast for mental health conscious millennials with unpopular opinions.
So, what led me to create this platform? When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit-and-run accident while on foot. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very high pedestal. This transformative experience has led me to create this podcast that is all things mental health. Each week, I interview mental health professionals and advocates from around the globe to share their authentic stories relating to mental health. For this week's episode, we have the host of PSA, and he is on a mental health journey, always sharing his story to inspire others. He is an advocate, a teacher, and an unpaid comedian, but most of all, he is a human like you and I who strives to improve his mental health every day. He also has an incredible project he's working on, which he'll let you know about at the end of the episode. So allow me to now introduce Izzy. Izzy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, catching me. I know you're busy, I'm busy, so I'm glad we was able to collab today.
Absolutely. We got our schedules in line. Would you mind please taking the time to introducing yourself briefly to our listeners and sharing part of your story before we dive in and get going? And also, please do share your role relating to mental health.
Well, I'm just an advocate, not a therapist. People try to say, "Oh, you're a therapist." No, I'm not a therapist. People say, "Oh, you like my therapist?" No, I'm not. I'm just a regular person. From St. Louis, Missouri, born and raised, moved to Houston, Texas in 2012 for college, and decided to stay. I kind of was trained on moving out of St. Louis, I should say. Not like I'm a dog or nothing, but like how I was raised was kind of, especially more so my dad than my mom. Because I remember when I tried to go off to school at first, she was just like, "Well, that's so far. What if something happens?" But, I guess God touched her heart and made it easy for her to let me go. Because either way I was going to go. Yeah, so I remember as, I'm definitely now mental health advocate. I have been into mental health since 2016. The first time I went to therapy, it was a lot of stuff going on at the time, and I had decided my sophomore year of college that I should have went, but I never got around to it. And in 2016, it was a situation that happened. I was kind of isolated from a lot of people, and I decided, let's take advantage of it now. I had kind of woke up one morning and was just like, I'm tired of dealing with this stuff, and had seemed like a millionth suicidal ideation thought, and I was just like, I'm sick of it. Looking back, things started for me around as early as 8. I think that what opened the door was the divorce of my parents. Although I didn't dwell on that for too many years. I think that just opened the door. And I dealt with anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts as early as probably like 8, 9, or 10, all the way up until 22. I'm 26 now. God is real, therapy is real. And so I got diagnosed in 2016 with severe anxiety and general depression. And started going to therapy, and then ended up coming about with the podcast. I got downloaded. PSA Podcast stands for Prodigy, Sportive, Attestations. And I call it the other side of mental health, because although I discuss things, well, myself and the guests I have from time to time, I discuss things that are, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, all those things. We still take time to just discuss regular things, because simply, in short, most people don't realize mental health is simply just how you act, think, and feel. So I like to hit it from that approach, and I challenge the audience's narrative and the way they think, and I like to change the perspective. So, for instance, if me and Vincent here, we don't agree on something, we can say, "Okay, I see where you're coming from," and then just kind of move on like that. So my topics range from all over the place, but they're under the umbrella of mental health. So if you like to debate, if you like to, feel challenged, check me out.
Well, that was a great introduction, and I am ready to get into the main event. On each episode, my guest and I go over this series of questions to help others improve their mental health. You ready to go, Izzy?
Let's do it.
Great. So you may have just previewed it a bit, but now let's focus in on the timeline. Many would agree that the more common or talked about types of mental health disparities are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and schizophrenia disorders. Let's talk about what you experienced.
So I had great. That was great. I had anxiety and depression, and got diagnosed general anxiety and general depression and severe anxiety, and I had it my whole life, and it was just I was always anxious. I was always worried about what was going to happen next, and just fearful of the worst case scenarios and everything. So I find myself overthinking a lot. Now, do I overthink? Not as much. I definitely can say I'm delivered from those things. With therapy, with my relationship with God, and then now being in therapy again, and not even to go because of the fact that I feel like by the world standpoint, I need it, but everybody needs a therapist. I have had guests on my show that were therapists, and they have therapists. Like that, one of my guests told me, Candace Pittner, based in Houston, Texas. She said, if your therapist does not have a therapist, then you don't need to go to that person. And so for me, it's just like I have some other underlying issues that I like to handle up. So I'm a teacher by day, and for education, it is free. So I'm taking advantage of that. When I was in school, it was free. People are paying millions of dollars. Some people are dying because they can't afford it. And and it's people like me who can get it for free. So I was like, I need to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And now your passion is speaking through the video here. I love it, man. You're discussing early parts of your mental health journey. Let's now switch to when you first decided that either a career related to mental health or that mental health advocacy that you're on right now was going to be the right move for you.
So here's the thing. I didn't even realize it. I just knew it was 2017. I was a substitute teacher. I graduated college fall 2016. And this was, like I said, the middle of 2017. And so I remember I was at work subbing at the time, and my dad called me randomly one evening. It was like, you're talented, you're a great writer, you need to come up with something showcasing your talent. So I came up with the PSA name, Prodigy Sportive Attestations. Prodigy is the name of the brand me and my dad share. Sportive is a double meaning light and playful, lighthearted. And then attestations means something delivered as true or news. So if you put it together, you could say Prodigy, and simply you could say Prodigy's funny news, or some Prodigy's light, truth, because it is the truth. It's just I'm delivering it in a light way, and making it light. And that's what we do on the podcast. But so it was originally a blog in the form of The Best Week Ever. I'm not sure if you remember that show on VH1. For those that don't know, it was a show VH1 used to do years ago, where each week they would bring comedians, reality stars, just people in the business to recap what happened that week. And they would just make light of it. And that's what PSA did. I couldn't keep up with it because it was too gossipy for me.
Right.
And I've learned with me, when I don't like something, I always find excuses for not doing it. And so basically, long story short, I left it alone, and around maybe like August, but I kept saying, I want to use this name. I love the name. I think it's super creative. And so I took a break, and I definitely just prayed and allowed God to like download and just kind of, took a reset, because sometimes we need that. And
absolutely.
And I remember one day I was laying in bed, and it just like the ideas just started to download like crazy. And it was a night I was supposed to go out, and I didn't go out. And so, the idea started downloading. I kept hearing either a podcast or YouTube. And at the time, it was before I lost weight. And so I really wasn't comfortable being on camera. So I was like, well, podcast, I don't even like podcasts like that. So I started doing research on podcasts. When I got the green light to do the podcast, dropped the first episode February 2018. Here we are, 2021, preparing for season 5.
Yeah, well, congratulations on keeping the podcast going. I know I can testify it is a bit of work, but what the good that comes out of it is always worth it. I love these mental health podcasts because as you're stressing therapy, each time I speak with somebody on the show is like its own therapy session in the way, especially because of this next question where I ask you for two and I say just two because I want your most important answers here, man. We're going to talk about short-term and long-term initiatives our listeners can do to create a more positive mental health space. What are two short-term or daily changes that our listeners can make?
Well, definitely short term, especially because I can speak with anxiety, and with anxiety we tend to get overwhelmed. So short term goal things that I think is good is to literally create 3 to 5 goals per day. Just something, even if it's something like cook, work out, something where you say, I'm just going to worry about this today. That way we're not getting too caught up in the future. And you say, okay, I need to do this calendar today, or I need to do this assignment today, whatever it is.
Love it.
Long
Celebrate
term,
the small gains is very important.
and so there's that. And then the long term, I would say, honestly, maybe just, evaluating who you're around, evaluating something that, you say you got a big project coming up, say you're creative like myself, PSA is not the only thing I'm working on. I'm actually working on a project now that, I want to be done before season 5 starts. Say you come up, it's kind of like, you kind of analyze and say, do your research, whatever it is you want to do. And reading a book now that's talking about that. And it's talking about having virtual mentors, people you may never meet, but they're on YouTube, they're on Instagram, and can see what they're doing. And whatever it is that you want to do, if you want to be, for instance, everybody don't want to be an entertainer, everybody don't want to be a creative, everybody don't want to be an entrepreneur, but some people, you want to be the best damn teacher you can be. Okay, it's many teachers, as a teacher myself, it's many teachers on Instagram who are killing it. And they're using their platform to help other teachers. So you want to be the best teacher you can be. Keep up with what they're doing. Find you a virtual mentor and just kind of, study what they're doing, see why they're so successful. You may not want the clout that they have, but you can use what they're doing as a teacher to take your teaching to the next level.
I love the positivity here where you're encouraging the audience to strive for greatness. And it's simple. Use the resources that you have in front of you. We're talking about YouTube and all of these things where, okay, you want to do something, you want to improve on it. Take his advice right there. Hop on. Do you want to shout out one influencer or someone you've been modeling, making these great life changes you've been talking about?
So for me, I follow a few people. I'm kind of all over the place. And you can see that with how my inspirations and things come about. So I really like, I like the Roommates podcast. They're actually from Houston. Well, one of them is, but they started it in Houston. They're a pretty big podcast. I really like Joe Budden. I really like Charlamagne the God. I really like, that's just kind of on that end. And as far as like the other end, I really like Gary V.
Yeah,
I really like those people who are very in your face. Like they tell it like it is. It is what it is. Either you like it or you don't. And I really love just different like little therapists that I come about in this, and so like mine is kind of like that, therapy kind of, but then at the same time that entertainment, very outspoken, very, you're gonna have to deal with. If you don't like me, I don't really care. I like people like that. So
yeah, you brought up good names there, especially Gary V. You want to get motivated, you want tactical advice, like you're saying, this is how it is, this is how you're going to win if you do this, do the little things. So that's another great answer. But let's now look into the future. Let's look into the present right now. What are some things you're working on? What are some things you're going to be working on that will overall raise the importance for mental health awareness?
So as always, PSA is the baby. PSA is the launching stone and the platform that I know that I was given. It's just going to launch me into many other things. I'm going to work on so many different, I'm a writer first. So and I tell people about this book all the time. You need to read it. It's by Cindy Trim. It's called The Soul Fast. Her tagline is, it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. So it helps you to really get to the root of who you are, find out what you like, what you don't like, why maybe some of your patterns of where they are. And, I definitely tell people looking at that. So I remember in that book, it was a part where she had said, because I tried to do it every year. I didn't do it last year, but I'm going to make sure I do it this year. And I remember it was a part of the book where it says, what's something you love that you could do for the rest of your life and not get paid for it? I love making people laugh and I love writing. And then now mental health. So there's going to be everything that I do is going to have some piece of that or all in some way. So for me, I definitely see myself in entertainment, in front of the screen, behind the screen, in so many different ways. But writing, I'm a writer, books, so many things. I'm actually working on a project now, which I can't reveal too much because I'm all about privacy. But with season 5 on the way, I'm working on a project that combines the in the Bible where it talks about having the full armor of God. That combines that, narcolepsy, and sleep paralysis all in one project. And that'll be coming sooner than soon. And then PSA season 5 starts in March. I will be dropping a trailer for it. I will be doing a I always have series doing my podcast. And last year I did a mid-season series and I marketed it like a mixtape. So it had a cover art, it had a back of like tracks that were just episodes.
That's cool.
And I'm going to model that again, but this time I'm leveling up. So it's not going to be a mixtape, it's going to be an album. So be prepared for the podcast album. That'll drop maybe at some point during the midway through the season. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for that.
That's very unique, and I'm going to have to keep in touch with you as far as its release so I can help you share that, because I know a lot of people on this platform, sleep issues is definitely a problem, and we know how that can certainly translate to some mental health challenges. But it's a great episode so far, and I think it is now time to get into the spotlight story. On each episode, I share the mental health story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they're healthy from the outside, they may not be on the inside too. For this week's episode, I will share the mental health related story of former U.S. President Bill Clinton. And we all know the Clinton name from the many years in politics, but today's spotlight is Bill. Politics aside, it is wonderful to see someone with his platform emphasize mental health initiatives. He was known for advocating for improved mental health policies while president, and he actually slammed the negative stereotypes that surrounded the conditions during a radio address back in 1999. He had a quote that was, "Mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, but stigma and bias shame us all." While researching, I also learned that the Clinton-Gore administration tried to eradicate the discrimination and stigma related with mental illnesses on many levels. They also worked towards improving mental health treatment and bolster research. Izzy, what do you take away from this story relating to mental health?
It's good to see people always, no matter who you are. And I say this all the time, I could be a fan of you, I could not really be a fan of you, but I'm always gonna applaud people using their platform to speak on mental health. As far as that goes, it's definitely the stigmas and the ignorances that go about it. Funny story, I remember one night we was out eating and stuff with some friends, and I just kind of came out and told people that I had, thoughts of suicide at one point. I was over it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend that said, "You look like you'd go through that." And I was just like, okay. Now, I didn't take offense to it only because that person to me is kind of,
right.
So I was just kind of like, I laughed it off. But it's good to see that more people are using their platforms. I say that to say this. There's more people using their platforms to speak on it, because now it's kind of getting rid of that. Maybe, hopefully by 2030, it won't be such a taboo or weird topic,
That would be nice, man. I mean, conversations like ours are what bridges that gap. And I think what you're doing on your own platform is completely remarkable as well, because you never know who can resonate to what story you share that day. And I think that's why it's important to bring on as many guests as you can. But Izzy, I have to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know our listeners are going to see all the value in the show. I really liked how the theme of the episode was really personal development and being positive with you, finding your passions, what you go for, not necessarily what's making you the most money, but what makes you happy. You said, what could you do forever and not get paid? Unpaid comedian, but you balance it with your paid endeavors. And for the entrepreneurs listening on, he's building his brand. He has big ambitions, and it's starting with the podcast, the PSA. So definitely look in the description of this episode for that link. But Izzy, it is time for the last word. And I also do this on the other podcast series I host, That Entrepreneur Show, because I want our listeners to really get to know my guests. Is there something that you would like to share with everyone that we did not touch on yet today?
Pretty much. You can kind of see I'm kind of a social kind of guy, but I definitely say if you want to laugh, follow me on Instagram. I clown all day. Follow me on Twitter too. Like I tell people, I want you to leave my social media pages either informed, laughing, or I want you to let's debate. Let's do it. I post a lot of controversial stuff too. I'm very controversial.
So share all those handles for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the good stuff is obviously my Instagram name _Izzy Bake Oven, not Easy Bake, Izzy Bake Oven, and then and that's Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. All right, YouTube. I do have some visuals for PSA, so check that out. Also, for those who want to keep it with the podcast, Instagram, it's Prodigy Sportive. So PRODIGY, and then Sportive, SPORTIVE. And then the Twitter is then that name again, Prodigy Sportive with Attestations. Attestations throw people off. He'll put it here. I ain't even gonna spell it, but he'll put it so you can see it. And that's pretty much it. Stay tuned because PSA is not the only thing I'm dropping this year. All right. I'm on podcast tour now. So you'll hear me on a lot of people's podcasts and YouTube channels until March. But, tap in.
Everybody be sure to check out all of that great and valuable content doing its part to break down mental health stigmas. And it is social media time for the show. And we're on whichever platform you like to use. We're at A Mental Health Break on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And we're at Podcasts by Lanci on Twitter. So you have updates from this show and that entrepreneur show. Of course, my handles are at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. And my website is vincentalanci.com. If you check out my books, DM me. I would love to hear from you all. We have Mr. Lanci Talks Mental Health, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, and How to Transform Your Mindset When the Norm is Changed, all on my website now. If you enjoyed today's episode, please continue listening and rate the show 5 stars. I work hard to find value delivering guests for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next episode of A Mental Health Break.